Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this live stream presentation, Bear Speak with Daryl Ratajczak. I am Rachel Landman, the Marketing Manager at the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEEC, located in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's talk. The Los Alamos Nature Center is currently closed, but we still have lots of ways that you can interact and connect with nature. Check the PEEC website, peeknature.org, for more live stream presentations like this one. As you may know, we're celebrating Bear Festival this week, and this event will run from Wednesday, August 26th to Wednesday, September 2nd, and is sponsored by Century Bank. Visit the PEEC website to learn about what other live events are coming up and to see videos, blogs, and more. We already have 2 videos posted, and we'll be posting more throughout the rest of the week. We're hosting a special Bear Festival yoga class this Sunday, and on Tuesday, September 1st at 7 p.m., Dr. Kathleen Ramsey will discuss how bears access food in our yards and communities, and what we all can do to deter this behavior. We're able to offer programming at this time because of our wonderful members and donors, so I'd like to send a special shout out to you for your generous support. So let's get started. I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Daryl, our speaker. Daryl Ratajczak is a wildlife biologist for the U.S. Forest Service in the Santa Fe National Forest. Apex predators and other large megafauna are his passion and specialty. Prior to joining the Forest Service, Daryl managed a black bear rehab, research, and education facility outside Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And he then went on to work for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and served as the Big Game Program Coordinator, managing the state's bear, deer, and elk programs. He eventually became Chief of Wildlife for the state of Tennessee, but found that the desk life didn't suit him and decided to pursue his lifelong dream of living and working in the West. Daryl also teaches regular online wildlife classes as an instructor with Wildlife for You. They offer lots of great programs about all kinds of wildlife, and I'll put a link to their website in the chat if you'd like to learn more about what they have to offer. So I'll turn it over to you now, Daryl, and monitor for any questions coming in the chat. Enjoy, everyone.
Well, thank you so very much. It is a pleasure to speak with everyone. I will tell you, I occasionally have internet blips, so if that does happen, hopefully Rachel can fill in for me until my internet comes back. But what I plan to do is talk to you for about an hour about a topic that I absolutely love, black bears. I spent a career working with them. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop my video. I wanted to show you that I am live and in person, but I'm going to stop my video just to hopefully make my internet connection a little bit more stable. But I will be back during the question and answer period. Once everything's off, I'll turn my video back on if that's all right with everyone. Okay, typically I give a lot of online talks. I do it as a side job, but mostly because I do it because it's my passion. I love talking to people about wildlife, and especially these larger charismatic megafauna, especially bears and cougars, the apex predator type of animals. Typically we save all the questions to the very end because I have about anywhere from 45-minute to 60-minute slideshow. And so if we could keep the chatter down in the chat box, that is always a good thing. And then I'll answer any questions you may have. But I'm here for you. We want you to ask questions, so just understand that. The other thing I do want to tell you is they do record these. And so that's just a heads up that this will be recorded. And last but not least, we're going to be talking about bears. They're awesome animals. They're amazing. They're nothing to be afraid of, but they can occasionally injure or unfortunately they can kill humans. In fact, we had an unfortunate incident in Los Alamos about a month ago. So just understand what I teach you about bears and how they behave. This doesn't guarantee your safety. Animals are always unpredictable. And so just understand, I'm teaching you the best science, the things that we have documented most as far as their behavior, but unfortunately bears are unpredictable. So nothing is ever guaranteed. Okay, so what I want to do today is talk to you, like I said, about one of my favorite animals, black bears. And the coolest thing about living with, dealing with, working with, and just seeing black bears is they have this language that they oftentimes try to communicate with us. I call it bear speak. They're very intelligent creatures. And so if you can learn to understand bear speak, you will have a much easier time understanding their behaviors, understanding what they're trying to tell you. And so literally I want you to sit back, relax, enjoy yourself. And then at the end, whatever questions you have, I will be absolutely happy to entertain them. And so once again, my name is Daryl Ratajczak. I am a wildlife biologist and also a bear specialist. Although Rachel mentioned a bit about my background, I do have a degree in wildlife management from a long time ago. Early 1990s is when I graduated college, so I'm an old guy. I did work at the Bear Center. That's where my passion for working with bears really developed when I was much younger, as you can see from the picture. But then I started working with, instead of working with individual animals, I started working with managing populations from elk and deer and bear. Eventually I was promoted chief of wildlife, so I was managing all sorts of wildlife populations. So I do have a ton of experience, but again, my passion and my favorite animal to work with is primarily the black bear. So with that, let's dive into tonight's lesson. All right, so I'm gonna ask you a really simple question. Why is it so important to know what an animal is saying to us? Now imagine everyone on this presentation tonight, viewing this, wanting to learn more about bears. You love the outdoors. You will go for a hike, whether or not it's in the national forest, whether or not it's a trail just outside of your house. Many of us love going for walks outside, and it's a great thing to do. And I guarantee you on our walk, we oftentimes have some little critters kind of squawking at us, whether or not it's a raven, whether or not it's a squirrel. A lot of these animals will be disturbed by us and start chattering at us. And for the most part, we don't pay any attention to them. But here's the thing, if you go for a walk and you're around the corner and this guy's trying to talk to you or trying to communicate with you, wouldn't it be wise to know what he's saying? He's a much bigger animal, can be more intimidating. And if he's trying to communicate with you, it's really good to understand his language. And that's what I'm hoping to try to teach you today. And so here's another reason why this particular talk is so gosh darn important. And so let's look at, I'm a scientist, I gotta throw at least one graph in there. So let's look at populations within the last 50 years. And we'll start with the simple one. We'll talk about humans. Everyone knows that human populations within the last 50 years, they've gone up. It's pretty easy to understand that we're having more and more people in more and more places all over our this beautiful green earth. What about bear populations? Does anyone have an idea what bear populations are doing? It's remarkable because typically when I go in public and I'm talking face to face with people and I ask them what bear populations are doing, primarily I get a resounding answer from the crowd, and they say bear populations are decreasing, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Actually, bear populations, especially in North America, are on the rise. They're increasing, sometimes at a very, very fast rate. And the reason being, back when European settlers first came to North America, we had this unfortunate philosophy of exploitation. We just took what we wanted, we killed what we wanted, and we more or less took over the land. And so what this resulted in was decreased wildlife populations of all sorts. And bear populations throughout the 16, 17, 1800s literally were wiped out, especially on the eastern half of the United States. But here's the thing, around 1900, some amazing gentlemen like Aldo Leopold, Gifford Pinchot, Teddy Roosevelt, those folks really started seeing that wildlife was a tremendous resource that we truly had to manage. And so they started the ball rolling of us in the United States, especially, of trying to manage our wildlife resources. And so with that came the development and creation of a lot of state wildlife agencies. And those agencies' mandate was more or less to protect and conserve the wildlife resources. So because of that, within the last 50 years, a lot of animals whose populations have been suppressed have really been growing, especially in those areas where those animals were extirpated or literally locally wiped out. And so bear populations in North America over the last 50 years have been growing at a tremendous rate. Now, I will tell you that in the West, they're pretty much staying the same. And so we're not seeing as much population growth as those eastern states. But overall in North America, bears are doing great. So what does that do? We have human populations going up. We have bear populations going up. And so literally what we have here, we have two worlds. We have a human world and we have a bear world. And those worlds are colliding. With more of each species, we are going to have these close encounters. And so this class is not a question of, should we learn to live with black bears? It's more or less about, hey guys, we have to learn how to live with black bears because there's going to be more of them, there's going to be more of us. And so we might as well learn how to live peacefully coexist together. Here's another thing I like throwing in is I like people, but I love bears. And so I give these talks not just for the people and my friends, I give these talks for the bears because typically whenever there's conflict, it's the bear that ends up losing. And so the more I can educate people, hopefully the more I can reduce conflict, and that just means bigger and better things for bears out there. All right, let's start learning about this wonderful creature. So we're going to talk about bear speak, like the way bears actually talk to us. And right off the bat, I know some of you out there are sitting there saying, get real, bears don't speak, they don't have a language that we can understand or anything like that. Well, let me pose a question for you. First off, hopefully you all know who that is. If anyone doesn't know who that is, well, actually, let me make the picture a little bit more how most people are used to seeing it. So if you see this old-timey kind of collie-looking dog, many people will recognize that dog as Lassie. Well, here's the thing. Lassie was this show, I don't know what decade it was in, probably I think the 60s and yeah, probably around the 60s. Well, this dog Lassie had an owner, Timmy. Timmy always had this knack for kind of getting in trouble and falling down wells and different things. And Lassie would always come back, bark or roll over or do crazy things. And it's the adults there would say, oh my gosh, Timmy's in trouble. Timmy fell down a well. And so Lassie had this uncanny knack of communicating with people. Obviously, we know that's kind of make-believe. She didn't communicate that well. But we all know that dogs are insanely intelligent animals. I got two dogs sitting behind me. They're actually both sleeping right now, but they're incredibly intelligent. They know when it's time to go for a ride, or it's just amazing how much they learn to understand our behavior, and I can understand their behavior. And that is dogs. Now, if you look on the grand scale of animals, you all may not know this, but some of you may know this. The supposedly most intelligent animal that we have out there besides humans belong to the great apes, whether or not it's chimpanzees, gorillas. We know they're extremely intelligent. In fact, we were able to teach sign language to a couple of these apes. And so they're extremely intelligent. So where along this spectrum do bears fit in? Well, bears are not as intelligent as the great apes, but they're above intelligence of our man's best friend. And so that leads me to believe that they are pretty darn intelligent animals in the grand scheme of things. And if a dog can communicate to us, bears certainly can communicate just as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to dive into this world of bear speak. And so before we can do this, this is what is so extremely important about this class, is before you can teach any aspect of any animal behavior, it is best to learn as much as you can about that particular animal. And so I'm going to give you a lesson about bear biology and behavior, and hopefully that will translate into an easier understanding of what they're trying to say to us. So to kick things off, let's start just talking about bear biology. And for those out there, I'm going to go through some color phases. Most people know this. You might not know all of them. But if you live on the East Coast, pretty much all black bears on the East Coast are black. Sometimes they have little white chest blaze. But as you move further west, and especially into more arid environments, you start getting these coloration differences. And so you could have a black bear that appears mostly brown. And you can see how easy that might be to mistake as a grizzly. Black bears can also be very blonde, again, very grizzly-like in their coloration. Another well-documented coloration, and in fact we see some of it around here, is this red or cinnamon color phase. Again, these are all black bears, but they're coming in different colors. Now these last two are awesome. They're my favorite colors for black bears. First of all, there is the white black bear. These are found on Kermode Island, just off the western coast of Canada near Vancouver. They're also called spirit bears. Now, a lot of people think, oh, that's just an albino black bear. These are not albinos. These are actually white black bears. And then one of my ultimate favorites are these glacial bears. Excuse me. These bears have this bluish gray coloration, and they're found primarily around Southeast Alaska, again, along the coast, but they have this bluish gray coloration. So you see all of those different colors there. These are all black bears, Ursus americanus. And so all the same species, they're going to use very similar communication or language when they behave. And so just understand, when you see these animals, they don't behave differently, they don't talk differently, they just look differently. All right, sticking with the biology, because this will begin to explain some of their behaviors. So let's first talk about some of their basic characteristics. Now, when you look at how big black bears are, they're not as big as many people think. So a mature male, anywhere from 250 pounds, can get all the way up to 400 pounds. A 400-pound black bear is a really, really big black bear. Now, I know there are instances of black bears getting 600, even up to 800 pounds in some areas, but typically those are bears that are feeding on unnatural food sources. But typically a wild black bear, male black bear, is in that 250 to 400 range. Now the female bear, on the other hand, is much smaller, usually around 150, 200 pounds, 250. You could have 300-pound females, but again, that's more of an oddity than anything. But you can see there that they're not really that big. Now, I will tell you, when I was working in Tennessee, the first job I had working at the Bear Center outside of the Smokies, I remember receiving a call from a woman who was concerned about this bear that had come into her bird feeder. And she had called me because she expressed some concern, and I immediately told her, take your bird feeder down, the bear will go away. And she's like, no, sir, that's not my big worry. This bear is very emaciated, it's rather small, and I'm just worried whether or not it's in trouble health-wise. And she went on to describe the bear and said, it's about the size of her German Shepherd. And at that point, I wanted to help her out. And I said, ma'am, do you have any idea how much this bear weighs? And she said, well, sir, it can't be any more than 300 pounds. I don't know how many 300-pound German Shepherds are out there, but it just goes to show that people hold bears larger than life. I will tell you, if you throw a bucket of water on there and wet their fur down, they're usually a lot skinnier than what you believe, and usually they're a lot lighter than what you believe. So, moving on more about their biology, let's talk a little bit about their home range. It can be big, anywhere from 60 to 150 square miles. That is often dictated by the resources that are available. So if a bear is in search of, obviously, food, water, mates, denning areas, the more you have of that within the habitat, the smaller your home range. Another thing that is that depends on tremendously is drought conditions. If you have a drought and some food sources don't produce, like the berry crop, those home ranges tend to get much larger. But for the most part, they can wander a great deal, some fairly large distances. And typically what a bear does when it's feeding, it will find a food source, whether or not it is a carcass, whether or not it's a berry field or a pinon crop. And what they'll do is they'll sit there and eat and eat and eat until that food source is exhausted. Then they go try to find another food source. Okay, this is a big one. Bears are what we call omnivores. That means they will eat both plant life and meat material. And if you look at their overall diet, the vast majority of their diet is going to be made of vegetable matter. So in the springtime, when the bears come out of their den, they're ravished because they haven't eaten in a while. There's not many very nutritious foods out there, so they're going to be eating a lot of grasses, a lot of greens. In the summertime, they get some berry crops coming in, and then in the fall, you get pinon, the acorn crop. But for the most part, they're eating machines. Now, why are they eating machines? Well, a lot of it has to do with their hibernation. I teach a separate class called Super Sleepers that talks about bear hibernation. They do things that no other mammal does when it hibernates, which is really, really cool. But keep an eye out for that class. But the reason I list hibernation here is it's so very important at predicting their behavior. The reason they're eating machines is when they hibernate, they may not eat for 3 months, 4 months, sometimes 5 months. And so in the springtime, when they come out, they're starving. They need food. They've lost up to 30% of their body weight. And they're trying to restore that all that fat that they lost. Summertime, they get a little bit of respite. It's the mating season. There's the berry crop. But then fall rolls around and they enter this phase called hyperphagia, which translates in Greek to feeding frenzy. And so the feeding frenzy is for them to pack on the pounds in preparation for hibernation. So because of hibernation, they truly are these eating machines. So if they're an eating machine, how do they go about finding their food? Well, obviously they use their senses. And so let's talk a little bit about their senses. So first off, if we discuss a bear's sense of sight, their eyesight is very similar to humans. They can see about as well as we can. The one thing I will tell you about that, oftentimes you will observe a bear standing on its hind legs. Some people misinterpret that and think the bear is ready to attack or to charge. Typically, that is just so they can get a better view of something. If they're walking in tall grass or in some brush or they're in a gamble oak stand, they'll stand up so they can see things better. And so that is based mostly on their sense of sight. They just want to get a better view of things. Now, if we talk about bears' hearing, it's excellent, far and above anything that humans can hear. And so I don't know the exact ratio, how much better it is, but we know for a fact that bears can hear things that humans can't. But this is the most important side of things. It's their sense of smell. Their nose is unequal. And in fact, I wrote a story called The Nose, the Glorious Nose, and it's all about how powerful and how wonderful a bear's nose is. So this literally drives their behavior in many, many ways. So let's spend some time talking about this. Okay, first off, let's think of our nose and what can we smell? Let's start with the human nose. And so we all know what we can smell. There's certain aromas we can smell better than others. But you do have to realize the human nose is not like really powerful. And so it's got to be a pretty strong scent in order for us to smell it. Well, man's best friend, dogs, have a sense of smell that's by and large much superior to humans. In fact, there have been studies done that look at the number of olfactory receptors within a dog's nose. The lining of the nose has these olfactory or smell receptors. And typically a dog has about 100 times more receptors per unit area than a human. So it makes sense they could smell about 100 times better than us. Now, if you look at the lining of a bloodhound, which is a dog that has the best sense of smell, they have about 300 times more smell receptors or olfactory receptors. This is where it gets awesome. If you look at a bear, and when they have looked at the amount of smell receptors within the bear's nose and its nasal cavity, they have 7 times more smell receptors than a bloodhound. And so if you do that math, 7 times 300, a bear can smell about 2,000 times better than we can. And if you're like me, it's like mind blown. But then you stop and think about it, and it's like, well, what is 2,000 times? I can't even compute that. What does that mean, 2,000 times better? And so I developed this analogy to hopefully give you an idea how strong their sense of smell is. And so if we go to the grocery store, we may buy a can of beans. So as a human, we bring home that can of beans, we open it up, and we then start cooking those beans on the stove. We can finally, as humans, start smelling those beans as they're cooking on the stove. Well, what about that bloodhound? If you take that can, before you even open it up and you put it in front of the bloodhound, it can begin to detect the presence or the smell of beans, because some bean juice might have got on the wrapper or on the outside of the can. That bloodhound can detect the beans before you even open up that can. Well, what can a bear do? A bear can actually smell the perfume that was on the woman who put the beans in the can 2 weeks earlier. And so again, if you're like me, it's like mind blown, because that's got to be crazy powerful. But here's the thing, if you're like me, you're like, wait a minute, that's sensory overload. This bear can smell everything, so its mind has to be going bonkers. Well, that's true, but here's another analogy that I came up with. So I don't know if anyone has ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese, or if you haven't, just think of walking into an arcade or a bowling alley that has lots of arcade games. You walk into a Chuck E. Cheese or an arcade, and immediately you are bombarded with all these sounds. There's bells, there's whistles, there's sirens, there's kids screaming, people talking. There's just this auditory bombardment that your ears receive. There's all these noises that are taking place. Yet you go in there, you sit down at your booth, and whoever you are with, you're sitting at the booth, and you can carry on a conversation, and you can hear the person who you're talking with. Another good example is if you're sitting in that booth, and all of a sudden over the loudspeaker, if your name is Jerry, and the loudspeaker says, Jerry, your pizza is ready, right away you're going to perk up. And literally what is happening there is your brain is filtering out all the noise, and it's focusing on the stimuli that are most important to you, whether or not it's a conversation with the person you're with, or whether or not they're calling your name for your pizza. Your brain will tell you, hey, this is important, you need to focus on this. And so that is the best way for me to describe what goes on in this bear's mind. So black bear in the morning wakes up, they're hungry, they're starved, they're looking for food. And so he puts his nose to use, and he starts smelling. And I promise you, he can smell the honey that's in the beehive at the top of the oak tree. He can also smell those berries that are blooming just down that logging road along the field edge. He can also smell those grubs that are coming up and growing underneath that rotted log down by the stream. And then he smells something in the distance, and he smells this wonderful smell that he knows is high in calorie. It's probably going to taste great. It is really going to help him out to feed his hunger. And so which one of these smells do you think he's going to focus on? And it's pretty simple. He's going to focus on that highest, most calorie-rich diet, or that most calorie-rich smell that he smells. And what that does is it dictates his behavior. He's looking for that food. He's going to go where he smells those good foods available. And so when it comes to bear behavior, it starts to get pretty predictable. Bears are eating machines. They're always looking for food. They're trying to find that easiest, most nutritious source of food that they could find. And so that dictates their behavior. They're always on the lookout. The problem is we as humans are often terrible with our food storage. And I'm not just talking about having hot dogs on our grill. When I talk food storage, understand that bears will eat anything. And so storing your garbage in bear-proof or bear-resistant receptacles, if you have scraps of food or trash laying around and a bear can smell it, if he can get at it, he's going to try to eat it. And so we're really bad at keeping these unnatural foods away from the bears. And so unfortunately, this leads to encounters. Sometimes they're not so good encounters, but most of the time, almost every time, they're not bad encounters. In fact, they're memorable encounters, but unfortunately, we tend not to pay too much attention when we should, because after all, a bear is a bear. And so you have to understand, when it comes to bears, bears typically want nothing to do with humans. And if I can't stress that enough, I use this picture to stress, these bears don't want to be around us. And if that face right there says, oh my gosh, this two-legged hairless thing is staring at me, that is what I hope you understand. Bears generally don't want to be around us. And that too will dictate their behavior. And so the good thing with them being so intelligent, like I said, they're above dogs. They're not as smart as or as intelligent as apes, but they're really, really smart. And so they will try to communicate with us. And in fact, they'll try to use this quote unquote bear speak to talk to us. So let's talk a little bit about how they communicate with us. And so typically that communication is initiated with a close encounter. Now, when I say an encounter does not mean just seeing a bear. An encounter, like if you're on a trail, if you're hiking around Los Alamos and you're high up on a canyon ridge and you see a bear at the bottom of the canyon and he has no clue you're there watching him, that's not an encounter. An encounter is when you are close enough to impact his behavior or he's close enough to you to impact your behavior. The two pretty much go hand in hand. And so let's talk about some encounters. Now, the first type of encounters that we're going to discuss are what we call defensive encounters. In fact, there's only going to be two. There's going to be defensive and offensive. So let's talk about defensive encounters with bears. And there's a couple of different kinds. First off, there is a bear at close range. You surprise a bear. You're walking down a trail, whether or not it's a canyon area or an area that has lots of vegetation, and you turn the corner and there is a bear 10 feet away from you. That is going to elicit a response from him. And so that's a close encounter in which you're kind of invading his personal space. Now, another one that is really growing in, I hate to say popularity, but the fact that we're seeing it more and more are encounters where people are hiking, or maybe they could be camping with their dog, and a bear comes into camp or on the trail with your dog, and you encounter a bear on the trail. That bear is going to be very defensive with that dog around, and unfortunately it amps things up quite a bit. And so both of those are defensive encounters where you're invading that bear's personal space. Another defensive encounter is when you encounter a bear around a food source. Now, this is a photo of a bear that's obviously on some type of carcass, probably an elk carcass or a mule deer carcass. But it's not just bears on carcasses. You could be walking and you could be in a Gamble Oak stand where there's lots of little acorns and the bear could be feeding there. That bear may become defensive of that food source. Another big one is living in Los Alamos, you're smack dab in the middle of bear country, and you can walk outside your house, walk down your driveway, and it could be garbage day and a bear is feeding in someone's unsecured trash can. There's another food source. And so anytime you're around a bear's food source, it could elicit that bear to try to speak with you. Another time is during early summer when mating season rolls around. Typically bears are very solitary. The only time you see bears together typically is When it's a mother with her offspring, and those offspring will stay with her for about 16 months before she kicks them out, that's usually when you see a bunch of bears together. It's a female with her offspring. But if you do see two adult bears together in early summer, that could very well be the mating season. And if you get too close to one or the other, they could be somewhat defensive, and it could elicit some communication on that bear's part. And then last but not least, and this is probably the most important of all, is a defensive encounter where you encounter a female bear with her cubs, especially if they're really young cubs that are somewhat defenseless. Bears can become very defensive when they're dealing with their offspring. And so all of these situations here, whether or not it's a close encounter with you and the bear, or with you and the bear and your dog, or a bear is on their food source, or mating season, or a mother with cubs, all of these is going to elicit, it's what we call a defensive encounter with a bear. And it's going to elicit a unique response from that bear. There was something I was going to say, and now I forgot, but hopefully it will come to me. Okay, so in this defensive situation, oh, I know what I was going to say. When it comes to these defensive encounters, this is by and large the vast majority of encounters you will have. If you experience bears out in the wild, almost every situation, it's going to be some type of defensive situation for the bear. And so when you would encounter a bear in this situation, its intention is to increase the distance between you and him or her. And so it wants to you to get away, or it wants to get away. So the intention there is to increase that distance between you and the bear. Because of that, bears often, the way they behave is they're going to put on a show. They're going to tell you right away, hey, you're too close to me. I'm nervous. I'm scared, or I'm mad. They are going to be, I say they'll become very blustery. They try to put on a show, trying as best as they can to tell you to get away or to give them space. And so their behaviors are really predictable in most situations. Remember, nothing's 100%, but in most situations, their behaviors are really predictable. And so one of the first things they'll do to tell you is they're going to say, hey, I'm a little upset. I'm a little nervous here because you're way too close to me, or you're way too close to my food source, or you're way too close to my cubs. And so one of the first things they'll do is they'll pop their jaws. They'll smack their lips together. And just so you know, folks, I have videos after this that I'll show you while I'm answering questions. But they'll pop their jaws. Very easy to recognize. You can hear it. You can see it. That is their way of communicating with you to say, hey, I'm pretty nervous. You're too close to me. Another thing they'll do is what we call huffing. And literally what they'll do is they'll start almost like hyperventilating. They'll exhale really loudly, and it's audible. They'll go, and so you'll hear this huffing from the bear. It literally means the same thing as a jaw popping. I'm upset, I'm nervous. Another thing you might hear is moaning. I'm not going to demonstrate that. I do have a video I could show you to demonstrate the moaning, but the best way to describe it is if you've ever seen Star Wars and you know Chewbacca. Chewbacca does that moan, and it's somewhat similar to that. Sometimes it's one note that is kind of extended there, but that's their way of just trying to tell you you're making them nervous. These are my favorite though. When a bear yawns or salivates, those are behaviors that tell you they're upset or they're nervous. And here's why I love these. It's when that bear does get nervous, it starts to lose facial control. And so you can see them start to get agitated. They'll lick their lips. And next thing you know, they're yawning. And how many people will see a bear yawn, and what do they automatically think? Oh, the bear's tired. No, the bear is not tired. The bear is very upset you're too close to it. The one I like even more than that is the salivating. Because imagine seeing a really big bear who's terrified of you, doesn't want you around, and the next thing you know, this big bear is salivating. And what do people think? Oh my gosh, the bear wants to eat me. And that is not the case either. So there's a lot of misinterpretations of bear speak. And so everything I showed you there, the bear is simply trying to communicate with you that they're upset. They're a little bit nervous. You're too close to them. They want you to back up, or they want to back up. They just don't have that out. And so it's really easy to see these behaviors. Here's the thing. If you don't leave them alone, the bear will up its behavior. It'll up its game. And instead of telling you they're nervous, they're going to start to say, you know what, I'm starting to get mad. And now I'm going to tell you to back up. And then the bears go into, they kind of, like I said, elevate their game, and they go into this next round of behaviors. And so one of the first things they might do is a bluff charge. Now, a bluff charge is not when they run at you from 50 yards away and stop right in front of you. That's a full-blown charge. A bluff charge is generally 1 or 2 steps in your direction. It's kind of like a decoy fake, like just a motion towards you, and I promise you it works. You will back up when a bear suddenly goes in your direction. Very effective communication on his part. Another thing they'll do if you're not leaving them alone is what we call ground swatting. And so what they'll do is they'll kind of look around, they look like they're not interested. Next thing you know, they swat the ground really forcefully. Or if there's a bush or a log nearby, they may tear that apart. And literally what they're trying to say is, if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to do this to you. And so again, it's very effective, especially if you're really close and they do that. It will get your blood pumping and it will make you back up. So those are all defensive behaviors, defensive communications that the bear does. Very easy to recognize, very easy to understand what they're saying. So what's your reaction? Well, obviously, if you see this stuff, you know that the bear wants some distance. And so your best reaction is to simply back up. Go ahead, talk quietly to the bear, let him know you're human. Hey bear, made a mistake. I'm sorry, I'm backing up. I'll leave you alone. And as you're talking to the bear, just slowly back up. Don't run, don't turn around and run for your life. Just slowly back up, keep that distance or increase that distance. And the bear, in almost every situation, again, it's not 100%, but in almost every situation, that bear will simply let you back up and he'll go about his business. Okay, I talked a lot about defensive situations because that is predominantly what you will encounter in the wild. What about offensive? Well, believe it or not, bears can act on the offensive. This first one is typically when a bear smells something. He's looking for some kind of food reward. And so he may smell something in your pack or on your person, and he's thinking, hey, I wonder if I could get something to eat off this person here. And so they may go in this offensive mode where they're trying to get closer to you. The worst case scenario, and fortunately it doesn't happen all too often, is when a bear reacts offensively, but instead of being interested in food you may have on you, they occasionally see the human as the source of food. This typically occurs in the far north Canada, Alaska, where bears are not exposed to humans all too much, but it does occasionally happen. And if you do research on fatal black bear attacks, the vast majority are these predatory attacks where they're actually seeking the human for food. Again, typically we don't deal with this when in the southern latitudes where there's a lot more habituation that the bear has. They're more tolerant of humans, and they don't typically see us as a food source. But these two situations are what we call offensive situations. And so what happens in an offensive situation? It's easy. The bear's intention is to decrease the distance. They want to get closer. They smell something. They're trying to find out if what they smell is a potential food reward. And so in this situation, instead of being all blustery and showy and putting on a demonstration for you, they are quiet. They're in stealth mode. Think of a cat or a cougar where they're just trying to be really sneaky around you. If you see a bear acting like that, then you know it's some type of offensive behavior from the bear. So what are some of those things to look for if you're out on the trail or you encounter a bear? If he's in offensive mode, what he's trying to tell you is he's hungry. He's looking for food. And so one of the things you got to be mindful of is this stalking behavior where a bear may follow you. Now understand, if you're walking down a trail and you look behind and you see a bear walking behind you, they could be going down the same trail. However, if you turn off on a side trail and take a different direction, and that bear turns and follows you in that direction, that constant pursuit is the thing that you really got to be mindful of. Because oftentimes, if you're walking to, say, a hot spring or some type of stream, understand that's a big attraction for many animals and they're all going to the same place. But it's this constant pursuit that you have to be very mindful of. Another thing is you could look at his body posturing. If his head remains low and he's kind of acting really sneaky, like I said, kind of behaving like a cat or a cougar, that is definitely a strong signal that he's acting in this offensive manner. One of the things they do is they try not to let you get out of their sight. They'll keep their eye on you. And so if they're trying to find this food source, they're not going to let that food source get away. So their eyes will remain locked. And so if you're on the trail and you notice this and this bear is following you and acting in this squirrely behavior like this offensive behavior, what's your reaction? Well, it's completely different than that defensive. In the defensive situation, you made a mistake, you calmly talk to that bear and you slowly back away. In an offensive situation, this is where you have to turn the tables. You have to let that bear know that you are the dominant bear in this situation. And so this is where you get aggressive. You yell at the bear. You may grab sticks or stones to throw at the bear. This is where people say, pull your coat up over, wave your arms over. You act bigger, but you try to scare that bear away. And you let that bear know that if he tries to come near you or eat you, you're going to eat him. And so I understand wholeheartedly this is easier said than done because your knees will be shaking. But in a situation like this, you've got to get to a safer place. If you have a bunch of people you're hiking with, you just group up. But this bear is not acting like a bear should by seeking a human out. And so this is where you have to scare that bear away. And you become, like I said, the bigger, the better bear of the two. So I do have a whole ton of videos that I'm going to show you. We'll go one by one. I'm going to wrap up this part of the talk because there's some awesome videos. I do want to summarize things. Just tell you, bears, they're extremely intelligent, but they're wonderful, wonderful animals. I spent my career working with these things. I've had a few scary moments, but never did I say, what the heck am I doing? They're wonderful creatures once you get to understand them. If they speak to you, and again, they're super intelligent, they will tell you what they're feeling in most situations. All you have to do is listen. Listen to what's coming out, their vocalizations, listen to their body posturing. Very easy to see it, and I'll show you in those videos. I will thank you for sitting through that. Like I said, I'll get to the videos, but I got a few more slides I got to show. First off, my slides are nothing without fantastic wildlife photographers. I've had a ton of people give me some photographs for this presentation, so I thank them. Got to always thank them. I do want to tell you, if you like this presentation, just so you know, I teach these classes all the time. My Facebook page is called Wildlife for You, but a week from today, I am teaching a class called Brown or Black. It's a bear identification class where we're looking at the differences between grizzlies and black bears. And so I wish I had a voting function here because I was going to ask you what kind of bear is in that photo right there. And that's what we're going to be talking about. You're sitting out there. I promise you someone out there is thinking, oh, that's easy. That's a grizzly. That is not a grizzly. That is a black bear. It is a cinnamon-faced black bear from the Tetons. I got other pictures from that bear, but that is an awesome class, especially if you're going to spend time around Greater Yellowstone or even up in the Canadian Rockies. Differentiating between grizzlies and black bears is something you really, really should be able to do. So visit that Facebook page. Speaking of that Facebook page, my classes are listed on this Wildlife for You Facebook page. We also have a website where you can look at the classes. But just follow us there. You can see where all the classes are. We do have a Twitter page as well, and just provide comments. So with that, I'm going to switch over and go to the videos. And Rachel, if you don't mind kind of starting gathering some of the questions, I'm going to try to load a few videos before we get to that. And if
Sure
Rachel,
thing.
if you want to join in, and we'll talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, that sounds good. Folks, if you want to leave any questions for Daryl in the chat, please do. I haven't seen many come in yet, but now that we've kind of reached the end of his presentation, go ahead and start typing those in, and I can kind of relay them to Daryl as they come in and switch between videos and questions. And yeah, sounds great.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, if anyone has any questions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a video, a couple of bear behaviors that we just described. And so this first video I'm going to show you is going to be the jaw popping and the huffing. It's a little bear. There's the jaw popping. And when it walks off the screen, you'll hear the huffing. That was the huffing. And so I will replay that video so you can see it again. It's very easy to see that bears do this quite a bit. This is their first signal that they're getting upset. All right, and then let me do one other of a bear huffing. Now this one, you'll just sit back and wait, and then this is a really good video demonstrating the huffing. There he goes. And so you'll even see his rib cage going in and out when they're doing it. It's an over exaggeration of their breathing.
Cool. We had about 4 questions come in just now. If you want me to start relaying those your way.
Yeah, go ahead, and I'm going to look for another video. So if you read one off, that would be great.
Cool, sounds good. So Aurora, who's 8 years old, asked, how can we talk to bears?
Oh, that's great. The best way, that's an awesome question, Aurora. The best way that we can talk to bears is let them know if you encounter a bear that is getting a little upset or agitated, talk to them in just a calm voice. Just say, hello, bear. I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt you. I'm going to leave you alone. But the main thing you're doing, Aurora, is you're letting that bear know that you're aware of it, that you are a human, that you don't mean to disturb them. And you'll pretty much send the signal that you made a mistake. And with you talking as you slowly back away, that'll put the bear at ease. And so they do appreciate when you do back up. That's what they want you to do. And by talking to it in a nice, calm voice, that will hopefully just let the bear, reassure the bear that you're no threat to it. You don't want it to be too intimidating. And so just that calm voice as you back away is one of the best things you could do. Excellent question, Aurora.
Awesome. Let's see. Stephen asks, if you're carrying trail food and a bear approaches you displaying offensive behavior, is it a good idea to throw the food away from you, or will that just encourage it to go for more?
Oh, awesome question. And we deal with this quite a bit. I give presentations with Kim Delosier quite a bit. Kim Delosier was the head biologist of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. He has probably handled more bears than any of us have seen combined. And he's good friends with Stephen Herrero, who wrote the book on bear fatalities. And Kim, when he was managing Great Smoky Mountain National Park, he had 9 million visitors to that park, and that park had one of the highest bear densities. And the big thing was, if you encounter a bear that acts offensively, should you throw your food? And he staunchly says, no, 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 simply because if that is taught, then unfortunately there's going to be a load of people that will just see a bear and immediately read it the wrong way and throw their food. And that would create more conflict than ever before. And so typically if a bear is approaching you and you do have food, your best bet is to you stand your ground, you act aggressive, and you scare that bear, and you let the bear know that it cannot get your food. And in almost every situation, that bear will give up its attempt. That is the best reaction. Now, having said all of that, if it comes down to it, and a bear is still coming at you, and you believe it's a matter of life and death, obviously your life is the most important thing. But we do not want to preach and educate educate the public to, if they see a bear and it acts this way, throw your food, because that's not what we want to do. It's not good for the human. It's not good for the bear. And so stand your ground, try to get that bear to go away, and it's a win-win for everybody.
Perfect.
Okay, you can do one more question.
And then we'll do some videos.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
I'm gonna pause it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So someone asked, what about whistles to scare bears away, or whistles and bells to alert them to you?
Very good question. There was a rave a number of years ago about bear bells, and everyone was going out to buy bear bells to either put on their shoes or on their walking stick. And here's the thing. Bears, again, being highly intelligent, can become habituated. And habituation is not a bad thing. Habituation simply, if you look at the root word, it simply means it's habit forming. And so bears in Yellowstone, bears in Great Smoky Mountain National Park, they're habituated to seeing people. In other words, they don't pay any attention to them, or for the most part, they don't pay any attention to them. So habituation is not a bad thing. The bad thing is a food conditioned bear. But going back to the bear bells is, if you live in a very popular area that has, hold on, Jarrett. If you live in an area that has lots of bears and lots of people, and all the people are wearing bells, the bears are going to be hearing bells all the time. And that's when they start to develop this. They more or less disregard the bell. It's not a big scary thing. Now, having said that, bear bells would work in more rugged or like wilderness areas where the bears do not encounter people. It's just a way to warn a bear of your approach. Now, when it comes to whistles, or even possibly an air horn, something that's really loud, that is something you can try. We always tell people, if you're worried about bears, especially if you're hiking in an area that has grizzlies, we always encourage people to carry bear spray. But if you're in an area like New Mexico that only has black bears, an air horn or something that could startle the bear would probably work equally well. But obviously, if in the unfortunate event that it is a bad situation, the bear spray is definitely recommended in that situation. But you can try bells and whistles, but the bells might not be as effective as you like. Look for another video.
Yeah, definitely. We have quite a few questions in the chat. So Anita asked, would you have dogs always on a leash in bear country like here around Los Alamos?
Very good question. And I will be the first to tell you that I hike with my dogs. I love my dogs. I got a big black lab, big terrier type of dog. It depends on how well behaved your dog is. And here's the thing, people may think their dogs are well behaved, but when a bear enters the picture, their mind scrambles, and sometimes they do things that you lose control of that dog. And so obviously having that dog on a leash would be 1,000 times better. There are some dogs that are trained enough that are on really good voice command, but I would say the vast majority of people don't have those kind of dogs. Every situation is going to be different. You could have a bear that turns the other way and runs and doesn't stop running away from a dog until he's 2 countings away. Other bears, and what we're seeing more and more of, is the dog will agitate a bear and it just amplifies the whole situation. Sometimes the bear comes after the dog. When the dog realizes he's in trouble, where does he run? He runs back to his master. And so there's been some unfortunate incidents up in Canada recently where people have been attacked because they're out hiking with their dogs. And so if you have a dog that you know would go bonkers if a bear is around, yes, it's probably best to have that dog on a leash, because in a city like Los Alamos, you never know when you're going to run into a bear. But I will tell you, if you are comfortable and you hike with your dogs all the time, as long as you understand the consequences, where you may get your dog killed, you may get yourself killed, and you accept those consequences, that is your decision to make. But dogs definitely do increase, it definitely amps up the whole situation tenfold, if not more.
Great advice. Brooke asked if you have any tips for mountain bikers.
Yes. I don't want to say don't do it, but I teach bear classes. I teach cougar classes. And one of the things is high rate of speed of travel oftentimes can trigger a predatory response in sometimes a bear, but more often a cougar. And so if you're on a paved road, whatever, that's no problem. You just enjoy your ride. The chances of something happen are small, although we did have a mountain biker killed by a grizzly up in just outside of Glacier a few years ago. But that was an unfortunate incident because they were going at such a high rate of speed that they ran smack dab into the grizzly. But when it comes to triggering a predatory response, it's more of a risk if you are mountain biking on those single track trails and you're going around. If you suddenly surprise a bear at close range, or like I said, a cougar at close range, their brain is hardwired to chase something. And so that is the risk you have to take. Understand that it's not the animal's fault in many of those situations, because it's just the natural response from them. So again, just like the dog situation, if you know and understand and most of all accept your risks, then that's your decision to make. Hey, I'll put this back on in case, so you can see that I'm actually a real human being. So
Sounds good. You want to do another video or two and we can do some more questions after that?
Oh, okay, I'll do, this is a short video. Okay, so I demonstrated some huffing, some jaw popping, the moaning, which was, like I said, what you saw in that video is probably the worst thing you could ever see, and I'm so mad at the BBC for doing that, but hey, it gets people to watch TV, I guess. So this is when a bear, this is a bluff charge, and so obviously the bear is in someone's garage, and just watch what he does. Just a couple of steps. You see him smacking his lips? And so that's one. We'll do another. That was a slow bluff charge. Let me do, this is a big cinnamon bear. This is probably somewhere out west. You can see, I love this video because you'll see how effective a bluff charge is. So the bear is just not happy this person is so close. And he's only going to take one step. I think everything turned out okay. I can't promise, but when they move in your direction really quickly, it is going to wake you up really quickly. So, all right. Any other questions, Rachel?
Yes. There are quite a few. Let's see. So Rick asked, if a bear attacks, what is the best defense? I assume like after you've stood your ground. He's heard that bear spray is not as effective as once thought for aggressive bears.
Oh, it's very effective. If I have an option of using a bear spray, which is 90% effective, I'm using it. And so I kind of get a little aggravated at yes, nothing is ever 100%, but if it's going to stop a bear 9 out of 10 times, don't let that 1% or that 10% or less deter you from using it. Having said that, it depends on the situation. So I have another class that teaches bear safety. And so in a defensive situation, guess what, guys? I am not going to teach you what Game and Fish teaches you. I've already talked to a number of people, and here's what I say, because a lot of people go by the rule of if it's a black bear, you always fight back. That is great when you only have 1 or 2 sentences to teach bear safety. But that is probably not the best advice. Here's the thing. If you're in a defensive situation, especially if you have a mother with cubs, a lot of times they simply want to remove the threat. If you look at the unfortunate incident with Karen Williams, the nurse from Los Alamos Hospital about 4 or 5 years ago, she surprised a mother with cubs when she was on her trail run in the caldera. And that mother was on top of her before she knew what was going on. Karen was fighting back just like the brochures all say to do. And the more she fought back, the more the mother bear fought back. And she had heard the cubs. She heard the cubs in the background. And from that point, she stopped fighting back. She curled up. She stayed quiet. The bear still gave her a couple more bites, but the threat was eliminated. And the mother bear got off of her, grabbed her cubs and left. And so I teach in a defensive situation, if you use your brain, the most effective tool you have is not pepper spray, it's not an air horn, it's not bells, it's your brain. So if you know the situation, like if you're in a really close quarters and you know you could surprise a bear and you know what's going on, if you think that bear is just purely threatened by you, I always say just curl up. The bear might swat you, might bite you, but it wants to eliminate that threat. In almost every situation, it'll move on. If, however, you curl up and the bear continues to attack, then you've got to fight back. Now, on the flip side of that, if it's ever an offensive situation, that bear is getting close, whether or not it smells food in your pack or it smells you, and it's in that close in the distance, stalking you, trying to get really close to you, that situation, you fight back no matter what. You are the aggressor. You're going to be teaching that bear a lesson. But in some situations, like I said, mother with cubs, which is a very common encounter, if something happens so fast, I'd say curl up. You might get bit a couple of times or scratched, and the bear will move on its way. It just wants to eliminate that threat to its cubs. So excellent question. Is there another one, Rachel?
Yeah, so let's see. Someone asked, should you call authorities if you see a bear eating trash?
Well, I'm trying to start this movement because I've been in the bear education business for 25 years. And we have been telling people to secure their trash, not let any food be available to the bears, and we preach it until we're blue. And one of the things that we started doing recently, and I've been preaching this for a little while now, is unfortunately the only time that tactic works is if everybody, 100% of the people are doing it. So you have a neighborhood, say you have a neighborhood in Los Alamos and 99% of the people are securing the trash, but one person has their trash can out, you're still going to create a bear that is food conditioned. And that's not good for the bear. The bear ends up dying in many situations. And so what I've been telling people to do is If you are in a developed area, if you are around your house or you have a cabin or something and a bear is coming close to your home, instead of that being bear country, that's people country. Your home is people country. And so if a bear tries coming to your home, scare that bear. Obviously, we want you to do it in a safe manner. So stay in the doorway, stay inside your house, but bang pots and pans, blow a whistle, blow an air horn, start your car alarm, do something to scare that bear away. And what we're hoping to do is if you have enough of those good apples that are doing this aversive conditioning, a bear is just going to give up on that neighborhood and say, listen, I'm not going there because they're absolutely crazy over there. And so it depends on what jurisdiction you're in. Some places want any bear that's getting into trash, they want you to report it. Some don't care about it. It all depends on the town that you live in and how active the bear education program is. But like I said, if you can't find that out and you want to do that bear a favor, if you see a bear snooping around a garbage can and you're in your car, blow the horn, scare that bear away. Do that bear a favor. Try to save its life.
Awesome. Let's see. So Maya asked, if you haven't, no worries, but not sure if you've seen the viral video of a bear very closely sniffing some female runners on a trail. What kind of behavior was that? The bear didn't seem to want to increase distance, so not defensive. The bear seemed more curious than offensive to her. Do you have that video?
No. This isn't that video. I should get that video. I know exactly what video you're talking about, and here's why, guys. Believe it or not, that video came out. It's probably close to a month ago, and I was actually camping for a few days up on the Santa Fe National Forest. And as soon as I got back into cell phone range, I got a text from another bear colleague, and he said, "You got to see this video." And so I ended up, just for those that don't know, that video was taken down in Mexico. And they got a lot of black bears in Mexico. In Mexico, the one city where it was is a population of, I don't know if it's 7 million. There's a lot of people around the city, a lot of black bears. And this black bear is a fairly large bear. It was skinny, but it was a fairly good sized bear. And it stood up and it was sniffing a girl's hair. And everyone's saying, oh, she used the wrong shampoo. She used honey shampoo. The bear was food conditioned. The bear was displaying very bad behaviors. And just so you know, I actually had to testify in front of the Mexican government. I had to do a Zoom meeting with officials and they recorded it. And it was myself and about 4 other bear biologists across North America to provide recommendations. In that situation, that is an accident waiting to happen. That bear, all it had to do is take a bite, take a swat, and that girl could have been in very, very bad shape. So it's a very, very dangerous situation when they become food conditioned. And so we recommended removing that bear from the population, and it was up to them if they wanted to find a zoo or do whatever they wanted. But to leave that bear out there and to display those behaviors, if that bear did it to, say, a 5-year-old child, and that child reacted differently, you're looking for trouble there. And so that is an awful situation. Now, I will tell you, the Mexican government did end up capturing that bear. Believe it or not, they castrated that bear to hopefully reduce its level of aggression, which I don't necessarily agree with. And then they moved it far away. Who knows what's going to happen to it, but that just goes to show a bear that gets too used to being around people doesn't end well for the bear in almost every situation. Very good question. Before you go to another question, I showed you a bunch of defensive behaviors, from the huffing, the bluff charge, the moaning, the jaw popping. Let me show you an offensive display from a bear. And this is one of those situations where you really got to perk up, because this is a bad situation to be in. And I'm going to apologize on the front end for a little bit of language.
Not saying very excited.
There's the bear.
Shit. Whoa! 400 meters from camp. Whoa!
100 meters from camp.
Get
you see this bear is focused on him.
Oh boy. Whoa! Go! Go away! Go!
See how the bear's head is fairly low? This guy is doing everything right. I love this video because he's being aggressive. He has a stick in his hand. He's yelling. He's trying to get it to a safe spot. He said he was 100 meters from camp. But the bear's head is low. The bear is intent on him and won't leave him alone. And so he's not turning and running. He's facing the bear.
Drop camera and run.
Well,
Will not run.
yeah, he knows not to run.
Whoa!
You've got to get to a safe spot if you can. So the bear's still coming.
Whoa! Get!
See, the bear is not, still a little timid, but it's just focused solely on him, and that's a bad thing.
Go!
So there's only one bad thing about this video. I don't know how it ends. So I don't know if they recovered his phone, but this gentleman was acting aggressive, yelling at the bear. He had a stick. You do have to try to get to a safe spot if you can, but when a bear is focused on you like this is where your spidey senses need to perk up and you do the right thing. All right, any other questions, Rachel?
Yeah, so someone asked, what do you think about eating on your hike in general? I think in reference maybe to the food in your backpack question from earlier on.
Yeah, no, excellent question. No, none of this is meant to tell you not to do anything. Just this information is tell you what you might encounter. And so you're going on a hike, you're camping, you're gonna take food, you need food, you have to be prepared for yourself. But just understand, if you do encounter a bear, they might come into camp because they smell something. And then if you identify yourself, you yell at it, they could leave and never come back. Typically, we have most of the issues when they come into camp and they receive food rewards. Then they start developing that behavior. And those are the bears that we end up having problems with. But by no means would I say not to take food or anything, because you need that food for yourself. Just make sure that food doesn't go to a bear in some way or another, either intentionally leaving it out there or leaving some scraps behind.
Got it. So someone asked, Dr. Lynn Rogers of the Minnesota Forest Service spent over 35 years studying why bears can hibernate for many months with minimum muscle loss, but humans in a coma for 15 days can need physical rehab for many months to regain strength. What allows bears to hibernate and awaken in the spring in almost 80 to 85% condition after months? I used to go to Eli and help replace the batteries on their radio collars, and I did the initial marketing for the North American Bear Center in Eli down the road from the International Wolf Center.
Wonderful question. I would strongly encourage you when I teach my Super Sleepers class, because it's all about bear hibernation. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Now, it's funny because it's one of my pet peeves when it comes to hibernation. A lot of people in the South will tell me bears don't hibernate. But I've been in bear dens all throughout the South, throughout the wintertime. They hibernate. What happens is the confusion is some scientists or researchers will try to use technical terms and they'll say, well, the bear's not hibernating, it's in torpor. And it's kind of like splitting hairs. For the most intents and purposes, humans understand hibernation as you're more or less sleeping throughout the wintertime. And that's what bears do. Now, they do it a little bit differently than most true hibernators. A true hibernator is something like a groundhog. And when a true hibernator goes into its deep sleep, its respiration drops, its heart rate drops significantly. We're talking a couple of beats per minute, and its temperature drops tremendously. A true hibernator, its body temperature will drop to just above freezing. Can't freeze because then you have cell damage, but they'll maintain a body temperature of 37, 36 degrees. And so they're literally in a frozen coma. You can take a groundhog in true hibernation and kind of slide it across the kitchen floor and it won't wake up because it's in that coma. When they do that, their metabolism decreases tremendously and they can stay alive in that state. Bears, on the other hand, the way they hibernate, we call them super sleepers because their respiration will drop tremendously, a couple of breaths per minute, or maybe even less. Their heart rate drops tremendously, but their body temperature drops from about 99 degrees to 92 degrees, only drops 7 degrees. So they're still warm when they're sleeping. However, in that state, that bear's metabolism drops almost as much as that frozen groundhog. And so they're not burning that much. Now understand, they're not eating, they're not drinking, they're not even defecating or urinating during those 3 to 5 months that they're in hibernation. The human body cannot do that. We oftentimes will have kidney failure if we don't defecate or urinate because we cannot recycle those byproducts in our blood. The bears can recycle that. There's been studies, they're trying to crack how a bear does that. To this day, we still are not sure. One of the things the bear does, it forms this fecal plug that will kind of block up its that anal passage. In the spring, when they emerge, they will pass that plug. And then the crazy thing is, and this is the most miraculous thing about bear hibernation, when they emerge from their den, they can lose about 30% of their body weight. So a 200-pound bear can lose 60 pounds. And the crazy thing is, it's almost all fat. They lose very little muscle mass. And so can you imagine if humans can harness the mechanism that allows for that? Can you imagine like being way overweight like I am, and you go to bed and then you wake up a few months later and you lost all your fat and you still have all your muscle? That would be the most amazing thing. That's what I'm crossing my fingers, hoping they crack first. So I wish we could explain how they do all that, but we just know it's literally a medical miracle that we still haven't figured out. But black bear hibernation is just truly phenomenal.
Awesome. So someone asked, I don't know if you're familiar enough with it to speak to it, but do you have any idea what triggered the recent bear attack in Los Alamos that you referenced earlier?
Well, the one I referenced earlier was actually Karen Williams, who was, she had an unfortunate attack up on the caldera during a half marathon. The one that occurred a few months ago, don't have all the details. I can't speak on it. So I don't want to say anything since I don't know all the details. The only thing I do know is the bear was considered to be kind of like a nuisance or a habituated bear that was food conditioned and was in the neighborhood, and it was used to getting food out of garbage cans. What triggered that, until they released all the details about the investigation, I don't want to speculate, just out of respect for the victim.
Absolutely. Thanks, Daryl. I think this is the last question that's come in. If anyone has one, but there's been a lot, so if I missed yours, feel free to retype it, or if you have one final question or two, feel free to type that in now. But someone asked, I think in reference to our kind of dog conversation earlier, will bears usually run away from a dog if like a dog lunges at them? Or does it just depend?
A lot depends on the dog. There are some bears, in fact, the picture of the bear with the dog I showed, that's a Karelian bear dog that they're trained to chase bears. Now, understand that a lot of people use hounds or dogs for bear hunting, and those hounds are bred to chase bears. But typically, if you take your average hunk of fur like I have laying over here, they're not as aggressive, and it's not initially as scary for the bear. And so when they have that encounter, it's so different. It depends on how big the dog is, how aggressive the dog is. If the bear realizes that the dog is no match for him, that is when it can turn into a bad situation. Because if it's the big dog that scares the bear is most likely going to run. But if it's a small, medium to small size dog, and the bear realizes they have the upper hand, sometimes it goes after the dog. Unfortunately, you have some dogs that get killed by bears, but even worse than that is when that dog runs back to you and it has a bear in tow. And so I wish there was a one size fits all that says this is what the bear's going to do, this is what the dog's going to do. But like the warning at the very beginning of this, I'll tell you what happens most of the time, but there are no guarantees. A bear could surprise you, and I've seen many a times where a bear did something that was fairly unexpected.
Awesome. Well, I think that is all of the questions that came in. Someone just said, thanks so much for the excellent talk. She's from Pittsburgh, so kind of the other side of the country, but they have bears in the area from time to time, and thought this was very useful.
Good.
But yeah, let's see. So thank you so much, Daryl, for joining us tonight. This was a great presentation and definitely a great way to kick off our kind of live event schedule for Bear Festival.
I'm going to give one more plug. If you enjoyed this talk, I give lots of bear talks, lots of wildlife talks, cougars. Remember, a week from today, I've got that bear identification in between grizzlies and black bears. Best thing to do, just look up Wildlife for You on Facebook page, and you'll see all the announcements and how to register and all that other stuff. So I enjoyed the talk. Awesome questions, and I'd love to do this again for you sometime.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to go ahead and put the Wildlife for You website in the chat one more time too, if people want to get the direct link to that. But yeah, we've got a lot more appreciation coming in from folks, both folks here in Los Alamos and folks from other parts of the country. So awesome to see kind of a diverse crowd tuning in. And if you liked this presentation, be sure to join us on Tuesday night too for our next Bear Festival kind of live stream talk. So awesome. Good night, everyone. And thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.